Hi, I'm Gary Summers, and welcome to a program that I've been doing for a long time in the schools for parents. It's called Kids and Drugs, Raising Well-Adjusted Children. Before I get into this, I'd like to just explain a little bit about the background of this program. I was working for a number of years with the RCMP doing a school program that I called Discover the Magic, Say No to Drugs. And when I was working with the RCMP, they developed a program in conjunction with the government of Alberta, where they wanted to do a program called Kids and Drugs to help parents deal with 4 different aspects of raising their children. So this is a parent's guide to prevention. It's not an intervention program. The things that we're going to talk about today there are 4 different areas. There's parent power, what good parents do, how to talk to your kids so they listen, helping them to make good decisions, and I guess really more importantly is what you need to know about drugs. So people always ask me, why did I get motivated to do this? Well, I was a teacher for 5 years, and I saw the devastation that drugs do to families, to kids, and I saw so many ruined lives with kids just took that wrong path. So when the RCMP asked me to go away and get trained on this, I jumped at the opportunity, because no parent needs to go through some of the devastation that I saw with kids. So that was my motivation to do this. So before we get into this, I wanted to just play a very quick video about the parent's role. So I just want you to take a listen, and then we'll get into it.
Looks like rain again today. Dark clouds gather and fill the sky. Don't know how to talk to you, just know how to say goodbye.
Have you actually got a driver's license? I don't think so. Did you see it back there, George? Go back where you came from. Learn this movie. Go back where you came from. What's wrong with you, Harry? I've had enough of you. I've had enough of you.
If a child only sees and hears and experiences in their living experience, around their parents or caretakers, positive attitudes and things and thoughts and beliefs, they only know how to match that. If a child knows that there's always a solution, many solutions to any problem, that we're never stuck, they know how to be that way. They're never stuck. They look for solutions. They're not stuck in problems. If a child sees in the parents that they're proactive, resourceful, and take responsibility, they will do that. And so again, the parent needs to be the model. So I say before the age of 7, the best lessons are the lessons a child learns from a wonderful guide. And we want to make sure that we give them the tools, the guidance, the lessons, the understanding about life, about love, about relationships, about all these great things, the power that they have within. and then give them what they need to be individuals that go through life solving problems, not creating them, helping humanity, extending their hand, being, creative problem-solving agents or beings on this planet, and make this a better world in which to live.
So let's talk about, what do great parents do? How can you set your children up for success? So the greatest and most influential role model and influencer in a child's life is the same-sex parent. And sometimes, divorce comes along the way, and a mother or a father tries to make up for a negligent spouse, and it's very, very difficult to do that. So the one thing that I always say to parents is just understand that the greatest role model and the biggest influencer in your child's life is not the siblings, is not the teachers, is not their friends, it's actually the same-sex parent. So a couple of things to talk about is, no topics are off limits for discussion. I remember I was talking to a parent, and they said, they asked their father, they said, "Dad, did you do drugs when you were in high school?" And the parent said, "That's really none of your business what I did in high school." So when you reflect on that, and when a parent says that to a child, the first thing that the child is going to think is, well, I guess Dad did do drugs. Or if there's ever an issue in that child's life, he's not going to go back to his parent to ask him a question. He's going to go to the drug dealer on the street, who is going to recognize the problem, because they're looking for kids who are troubled, who have problems. And the drug dealer is going to reach into his pocket, haul out a pill, and say, "Look, I can solve your problem right here." So we have to make sure that kids can come to us, your children can come to you and talk to you about anything without judgment. I think that's the critical point here, is not to judge your kids, because your children want the same things as what all of us do. We want to be successful, we want to be loved, we want to do things that are going to help. So sometimes I hear parents say, "What was my child thinking?" Well, just to give you a little bit of background and physiology on the brain, back thousands and thousands of years ago, we had what was called a reptilian brain. It was our instinct. It was that very, very basic brain. It was just our instincts. Then, of course, as we evolved, we developed a limbic brain, and that's kind of our emotional brain, our feelings brain, and that's kind of the fight-flight that you get when you're faced with adversity. You're either going to stand your ground and fight, or you're going to run away, or the newest term now is freeze, where you just don't know what to do. And of course, the latest, which is your neocortex, which is your rational and thinking brain. Now, here's the thing. Your neocortex is not fully developed until you're at least 25 years old. So when you look at a teenager and they're making these really, really bad decisions, and you're saying to yourself, "What was my child thinking?" Well, guess what? They weren't thinking, because they haven't developed that part of their brain yet. So it's our job as parents to help guide them through that process, so that they can learn to make rational decisions, that they can learn to use their thinking brain. So the greatest life skill we can teach our children is insight. And insight is the ability to gain a deep understanding from an event and learn from life experiences. We all make mistakes. All of us do. But as kids are growing up and they still fully haven't developed that brain, they don't understand that there are consequences to everything. And a lot of the kids that I talk to, and a lot of the kids that I taught in school, don't have insight. And they live life by, here's the difference between kids and adults, or most kids and most adults. You can't put all of them into the same category. Kids live life by the best case scenario. Adults live life, or most adults live life by the worst case scenario. So a child, your son, your daughter, could get into a car with someone who's under the influence, drugs, alcohol, and think that everything is going to work out perfect. They're going to smoke and they don't think that, well, cancer happens to somebody else. Whereas us as mature adults, most of us wouldn't think to get behind a wheel and drive, because we look at what's the worst thing that could happen. Well, we could get into an accident, we could knock someone down, we could kill someone, but kids don't think that way. They don't have insight. So what we want to do is we want to teach our kids that everything that they do comes back and hits them. We call it karma. And when I talk to kids and adults, we don't look at life as cause and effect. We look at life, cause and effect means something out there caused you to be a certain way. I ask people to pull back. I ask kids to pull back and look at life as, well, it's not what happened to you that's the problem. It's what you did to make something happen to you. So if we can get our children to understand that when, as Stephen Covey says, when you pick up one end of the stick, you pick up the other end of the stick. So there's consequences to everything that we do. And if we can get our children to understand that everything that they do will come back at some point in their life and either be beneficial to them or it could come back and haunt them. And I always say, you know, you're always only one step away, one choice away, one decision away from changing your life. And that can be in a good way or it can be in a bad way. So the biggest assumption that many kids make, as I said, is they live life by the best case scenario. When your child makes a mistake, sit them down and talk to them about the mistake. Ask them, what are their other options? Could they, if this choice, if this scenario came up again, what could be a different choice that they could have made that things could have worked out better for them? It's the difference between discipline and punishment, and we'll get into that. We'll get into that a little later on in the presentation. But here's the biggest thing I find with young kids is they don't have a reason to get out of bed in the morning, meaning they don't have goals. When I talk to young kids, I say, where do you see yourself in 3 years' time? They don't know. Where do you see yourself in 5 years' time? Where do you see yourself next month, next week, next year? They have no idea. So one of the best gifts you could give to your children is to teach them how to set goals. You know, what a great thing for self-esteem when your child can watch themselves and observe themselves doing something and being successful at it. But I've seen correcting homework for kids in my class, and I know that the child didn't do the homework. I know they didn't do it. So the parent comes home and helps with the homework and does the homework for them. And what you're basically saying to your child is, I don't think you're capable to do that, so I'm going to have to do it for you. You know, it's okay to let your child fail. It's okay to let them fall down. They dust themselves off and they say, I'm never going to let that happen to me again. But, you know, we've become a generation of helicopter parents where we walk around behind our kids, stopping them from making mistakes. Some of the best lessons in life I've ever learned was from some of the biggest mistakes I made in life. I managed to dust myself off, pick myself up, and learn from it. So the definition of helping versus enabling. And helping is doing something for someone that he is not capable of doing himself. And enabling is doing something for someone that he could and should be doing himself. We're going to talk a little bit later about Generation Y and Z and the millennials and what we've created as a culture for those people. So anytime you have an interaction with your child, here's the question you have to ask. How can I make this a teachable moment? Every single interaction can be a teachable moment where you can sit down with your child and teach them exactly what happened. So here's the way I would like every parent to have a mindset. And the mindset is, my child is developing and I'm interested in their development. So just reflect on that for a minute. My child is developing, understanding that they're not going to get everything right. They're going to make mistakes, but you're interested not only in the things that they do well, but in the things that they make mistakes with. And that's where you have to help them, to kind of guide them along. It's not dragging them, it's not pulling them, it's not pushing them. It's a guide. As the young lady said in that first video, you know, your kids are not your kids. They're on loan to you. And to be that guide so that, you know, when they're ready to leave, you've prepared them for the next life. I want you to read this next statement. If a child can do advanced math, speak 3 languages, or receive top grades, but can't manage their emotions, practice conflict resolution, or handle stress, none of that other stuff is really going to matter. Emotional self-regulation is critical for children, and I've seen it so many times in my classroom. I've seen things happen where kids just go from 0 to 100, and you know, we have a fairly good idea where they get that from. As parents, we have faults, and children see and do what they see. So it's important to teach our kids emotional self-regulation, emotional intelligence. Emotional intelligence, Stephen Covey says, is balancing our feelings with the feelings of others. That's what we need to teach our kids, to learn to deal with adversity, not to run away from it. Not to run away from it. It must be awful to feel you're not needed. You know, we've grown up, and we've seen our kids grow up. We've seen our kids start to develop friendships and get boyfriends and girlfriends, and they feel they don't need mom and dad anymore. And I think we are successful as parents when our kids don't need us anymore. Not that we're not there for them. We are always there for them. But when you can send your child out into the world and they can stand on their own 2 feet and make their own decisions, and they're good decisions, most of them are good decisions, and they can be a contributing member to society, that's when I think we've been successful. So here's some food for thought. And I guess there may be some millionaires listening to this right now with endless pockets. Maybe you're okay with your kids living with you indefinitely. Maybe you want to support your kids indefinitely. If we don't have millionaires, excuse me, if you're not interested in having your kids live with you indefinitely, or supporting your kids indefinitely, what are you doing about it? What's your game plan? And that's what I want to talk to you about and spend some time today, is talking about a game plan that's proven, that the experts say works, so that you set your child up for success. Albert Einstein said insanity is doing the same thing over and over again, expecting a different result. I say, if you're still doing what you've always been doing, you're going to get what you already got. When I talk to young kids, I say, you know, if you're failing math, there's a reason why you're failing math. Now, you can blame the curriculum, you can blame your teachers, you can blame everybody else, and I just wonder how that's working. If you're going to continue with that same mindset and continue to do the things that you're going to be doing, don't expect to get better marks in math, because you have to change what you're doing in order to change the result. And when I talk to parents, as I'm doing now, I say, you know, if you have a belligerent teenager, if you have a teenager that disrespects you, then something has brought him to that point, and you need to do something about that before it gets any bigger. You know, we spend all our time driving our kids around, and it's almost like they take it for granted, it's expected that, you know, parents don't have a life. They have an abundance of money. Kids just put their hand out and you put $20 in their hand and you say, see you later. But, you know, I'm going to get into this a little bit later about setting up contracts with our kids. And social psychologists all say, guidance counselors will all say that having a contract is a really, really good idea, because it teaches the children that they have an ownership in this stake, and they just can't have it their own way all the time. When I talk to business owners, they say that young people coming out now want to get paid, but they don't want to have to work for it, because they spent all their lives not working for things. So I worked a lot with the RCMP, I worked a lot with the RNC. We've gone to communities all over the province. And the drug problem in any community is not a police problem. It's not a school problem. It's everybody's problem. And I think once we take ownership of that and realize that it's everybody's problem, I don't like cliches, but you know the cliche is it takes a village to raise a child. Well, it's true. It's really true. And when we get into some of these specifics of talking to your kids and helping them make good decisions, all of this will come fairly clear. So if you look at the slide about the benefits of effective parenting, I don't have to read them out to you, but you can see healthy and confident children, less child abuse and neglect, less youth substance abuse, better schools, safer neighborhoods, less bullying, greater employee productivity. And it all comes back to how we parent our children. And that's what I'm here sitting down now talking to you about, how we can do that. Ann Landers had a great quote, and I thought it's so wonderful. And the quote says, "It is not what you do for your children, but what you have taught them to do for themselves that will make them successful human beings." So that comes back to this teachable moment that I talked about earlier. So anytime you're in an interaction with your child, before you take that step forward, ask yourself this question: at this particular moment in time, what am I teaching my child? Am I teaching him respect? Am I teaching him work ethic? Or am I teaching him to be lazy? Am I teaching him that you don't have to work for anything, you just come and you can ask mom and dad and you can have whatever you want? So that's the key right there. It's not what you do for your kids, is what you teach them that makes them successful. So every moment is a teachable moment. Every moment is a teachable moment to teach your kids something of value that they can use to make them successful as they move on in life. So, raising well-adjusted children. Let's get into how this works. So, really, all we really need for our kids, and if you look at the slide, is we want them to be healthy, we want to be happy, and we want them to be honest. That's really all we want. Everything else is a bonus. Everything else is. Those are the three critical things in everyone's life: to be happy, to be healthy, and to be honest. If we can teach our children those three critical aspects of life, then they can't help but be successful. You've often heard the saying, "I have to see it to believe it." And I think that's wrong. I think we have it backwards. I think the saying should be, "If I believe it, I'll see it." You know, if you see a belligerent child, if you see a disrespectful child, and you believe that, then you're not going to see the other side of that child, this child who's full of potential, the child who can go out and do wonderful things. But if you believe that the child has potential, if you believe that your child can be a success, can be anything that they want to be, then that is what you'll see. So instead of saying, you know, I have to see it to believe it, you're going to have to start coming back and showing me that you can do well in math and science and everything else before I believe it. Then you'll act towards your child as if they're a failure. But if you truly believe that they have that inner potential to be great, then that's what you'll see. Because our brain can only focus on one thing at a time. If you focus on what's wrong, then you're going to see what's wrong. But if you focus on what's right, focus on the potential, then you'll see that as well. How many of you have expectations? Expectations about yourselves? Expectations about your kids? Are your expectations too high? Are your expectations too low? Are you a perfectionist? Do you expect your children to be perfect? You know, I think it's unrealistic to not have expectations, but I think it's realistic to manage your expectations. I think that's the key. That's the success, is to manage your expectations, because if you expect your child to grow up and be perfect, then you're setting yourself up for failure. Life happens. Things happen. It gets in the way. And it's never what happens to us that's the problem. It's how we deal with it. And we'll talk about that as we get into this session. You know, the only thing that really matters to a child is for the father or the mother to put their arm on their child's shoulder and say, I'm here. I will walk through life with you. I will help you every step of the way. And I'm here. But I'm not going to drag you. I'm not going to push you. I'm not going to pull you. But I'm here as a guide to help you so that you'll reach your full potential. And that's all that any child really wants. That's all they really want. They want safety, so that home is a safe place to be. And they want the ability to explore. So let them explore. Let them find out about life. Let them find out about how the world works. To a point where at some point you may have to see them going down a dangerous path, and you may have to pull them back. But just let them explore. Let them find out about themselves. Let them discover their limitations. You know, we all have faults. None of us are perfect. We can't put our kids up on a pedestal and think that they're going to be perfect. That's setting them up for failure. But to let them be comfortable with their flaws. I can't fly. I'm comfortable with the fact that I can't fly, and I accept that. But I would hate to think that I could jump out of a plane without a parachute and halfway down realize that I can't fly. We got to be careful not to set our kids up to put them so high that they expect everything, that everything is going to work out perfect for them. We have to be able to manage that for our kids. One of the things in the research that I've done that helps kids with setting goals and watching themselves is a ritual. Is a ritual for going to bed. And I suggest to parents to do up, and you can buy these online, or you can make one up yourself on the computer. So the child ticks off the things that he did, and he's watching himself be successful. And how simple is that? I cleaned up my toys. I took my clothes off, took a bath. I put on my pajamas. I brushed my teeth. I used the bathroom. I read a book. I'm ready for bed. In a span of a very short period of time, that child was successful at 7 things, and the child observed. And then the next morning, you wipe it clean and he starts again. What a great concept to teach kids responsibility, to teach them how to observe themselves doing something for themselves. Now, as parents, we also have to understand that sometimes things can go wrong, and we have to be aware of those things. So some of the things for you to be aware of that could be moving towards a drug problem. It could be towards alcohol. If your child complains of headaches, it could be bullying. It could be a problem at school. So here are some of the danger points just to be aware of. Number 1 is your child complains of headaches. Number 2, his marks start to drop. Number 3, not eating. Number 4, complaining of pains in their stomach. The fifth one, a loner, no friends. And the last one, not being able to sleep at night, coming in and into your room at night. Those are symptoms of an underlying problem that is important for you to recognize and important for you to address. So let's move into 5 factors, which are what I call risk and protective factors. And they are the individual, your child, your family, your peers, their peers, the school, and the community. Now, if your child is involved in a sport, hockey for instance, you wouldn't send him out to play hockey without equipment on. That would be dangerous. Your child could get hurt. Well, here are the 5 protective and risk factors that you need to know as a parent to help your child. Are they strong? Are they protected? Or are they at risk? So let's look at each of those individual factors. As an individual, do they have high or low self-esteem? Because if your child has high self-esteem, then he's not going to have any problem with saying no. If your child has low self-esteem, then he's going to have some problem with saying no because he doesn't want to lose friends, he doesn't think he's strong enough to say no, and he'll be a follower. So that's the first area you have to identify. And if your child is high, then you're okay with him on that level. But now let's look at family. Is there peace in the family, or are you constantly arguing? Does your child see you and your spouse fighting all the time? Because when they see that, they're going to identify as if that's their fault. Or they may think of, well, my world is about to come down, crashing down upon me. So is there peace? Is your home a safe place for your kids? And if it is, then that's fine. That's another area you don't have to worry about. What about their friends? Are they good students? Who do they hang around with? And sometimes you really don't have a choice as to who your kids hang around with, but it's important to know that. Because if they have friends who are skipping school, who are belligerent and to their teachers, to their family, to their parents, then that's a risk factor that you need to be aware of. The next one is the school. What kind of programs does the school have? Where is the location of the school? You know, there's never really a problem, and I've done a lot of work in the schools. It's usually not a problem with drugs in the school. It's usually not. What the problem is a drug dealer who's parking his van across the street from the school, and when the kids are out at recess or out at lunchtime or walking home from school, they're walking by that drug dealer. And it's really important for you to be aware of that, because that's a risk factor. If that's happening, I'm not saying it's happening everywhere, but it's happening in a lot of places. So you need to be aware of that. And the last one is the community. Where are you in your community? Is your neighborhood safe? Are there bullies in your community? Is there a drug house on the next block down? You may not know that, but it's important to get as big a grasp of these 5 risk factors. Now, at the end of this program, I've developed a 50-page parent manual. And I would recommend that you download it, print it off, and all of this information is in the manual so that you can take the page that this is on and do some work on it. And I would recommend that everybody to download this manual and to work through all of the different areas. So that's what great parents do. So now let's get into how to talk so kids will listen, and listen so kids will talk. There's a great book, I can't remember who wrote it, but that's the exact title of the book. And it's a really, really, really good book. I read it, and it's got some really, really good insight into that. So what I want to do now is play a video on talking with your kids. And I want you to really listen to what one of the parents has to say about that. So just take a quick listen.
A couple different cute little colors.
For many teenagers, a daily demon they must deal with is peer pressure. They may feel forced or influenced by their friends to dress a certain way, cut school, or even start smoking and drinking. Barbara Wells of Education Plus suggests how parents can help.
Peer pressure comes from wanting to be accepted and not feeling strong enough to say no. Start by working on self-esteem. Children with high self-esteem like themselves, feel confident, and accept their strengths and weaknesses.
Help your kids think positively about what they can achieve. Encourage them to try and learn new things. Focus on their efforts and celebrate their successes.
So
No,
she's going to get called back.
She just
as
has a
well.
little bit of a temper.
When it comes to peer pressure, when I talk to the kids, I try to give them just advice, and they probably get tired of hearing it. It's the same thing all the time. You know, don't do something just because someone else does, or if you really don't want to do something, you know, be strong, that kind of thing.
Give your children tips on how to say no without losing friends. Kids can be taught how to say no by suggesting alternatives or using humor when they turn their friends down.
Recognize just how strong an influence peer pressure can be. Then make sure your children have the skills to deal with it.
What did she say in that video? She said, work on self-esteem. As a hypnotherapist, I help people with common things: smoking, weight loss, stress, getting a better night's sleep, self-confidence. The vast majority of people who come to see me have low self-esteem. And I don't think, as a parent, none of us ever get up in the morning and say, you know, I think today is the day I'm going to ruin my child's life. None of us do that, but there are times when we have to be very careful what we say to our kids. And one of the things that we really need to work on is building up our kids' self-esteem. But building up our kids' self-esteem doesn't mean putting them on a pedestal, as I said before, thinking that they can do and be anything. But it's teaching them that it's okay to be okay with their weaknesses. Not to focus on weaknesses, to focus on their strengths, because every single child has a strength that they can focus on. When I would do my magic show, I would say, you know, everyone has some magic inside of them. You don't have to be a magician to be magic. What you have to do is to go inside and find what that magic is. Whether it's a teacher, whether it's a construction worker, whether it's any job, a plumber, a pipe fitter, an electrician. Whatever that magic is that you have inside of you, and make that magic the best magic it possibly can be. Because every child has that magic inside of them. Every single child does. So let's talk about communicating with our child. And I always ask parents, what are the best times? And when you communicate, think about those teachable moments that I talked about. So you know the answers that I would get back as when we're in the car driving to school, coming home from school, before dinner, during dinner, and I asked them, what are good conversation starters? And I call them they're called open-ended questions, because when you ask a question that requires just a yes or a no, guess what? You're going to get a yes or no. What did you do in school today? Nothing. How was it? Good. No. Yes. So here are some really good open-ended questions and prompts to help you start a conversation with your child. Tell me about what happened in school today. Why do you think? How did you come up with that solution? What happened when? What else can you do with? What would happen if? How might you use what happened to you today to learn a lesson from it? I wonder if. So those are questions that will get your child thinking about life, helping them to understand the life that they're ready to walk into when you're not going to be around. Open-ended questions. Think about. So, when not to talk to your kids? When they're hungry? when they're angry, when they're late, when they're tired, when they've had too much to drink, when they're under the influence of whatever. And there are going to be times when your child is not going to want to talk. So what you do is, no one likes to be forced. Believe it or not, kids want the same things as what we do. None of us want to be forced. You know, there's a thing in your subconscious mind called your neediness factor. And it detects need and it pushes back right away. For instance, if I said to you, you know, I read this book and I really think you should read it. Well, subconsciously you're thinking, well, why would he tell me I should read it? If I thought I should have read it, don't you think I would have read it by now? And that's the pushback that you get from your children when you tell kids that they have to do something. So an issue happens at home, at school, somewhere, and you want to talk to your child about it, and they say, Mom, Dad, I don't want to talk about it. So you give them a choice. And the choice is, either one is good enough for you. So why do you give your child a choice? Well, you give your child a choice because then it becomes their decision and not yours. If you say, well, we're going to talk about this when you get home after school tomorrow, whether you like it or not, I'll guarantee you the child is not going to like it, and right away now they put up a wall. So you give them a choice to say, okay, I understand, I respect that. So which would you prefer? After school tomorrow or after dinner tomorrow? Your choice. Okay, Mom, when I come home from school tomorrow, we'll talk about it. Now, what has he done? He's given you permission to talk to him. Even though he doesn't realize he's done it, he's given you permission to talk to him. And right away now, it will be a much more open conversation about it. So here's how your brain works. And I won't get into the nitty-gritty details of it, but you have a left brain, you have a right brain. Your left brain is your thinking brain. It creates thoughts, it creates words, it creates sentences. Everything happens in your left brain. Now that can be conscious or it can be subconscious. That's where our habits come from. We get up every single day and we do the same thing over and over again without thinking about it. That's because we've done it so often that we don't think about it. It becomes subconscious. Have you ever driven your car and got to a point in the road where you thought, I should have turned back there somewhere? That's your autopilot. That's your subconscious. But there's also the conscious side of your left brain where you think about what you're going to say, and then that thought comes over to your right brain, and your right brain paints a picture of that thought. And then the behavior follows. So your left brain creates a thought, your right brain paints a picture of that thought, because your right brain is your emotional brain. It's your imagination. That you dream from the right side of your brain. So your left brain or your doctors, your lawyer, it doesn't have anything to do with intelligence. Your left brain is your doctors, your lawyers, your engineers, your accountants. Their left brain. Now they use both sides. Everybody uses both sides. But those left people are left brain because they have to be. You can't ask your accountant, why don't you forget about general accounting principles and just do something creative with the books, or they wouldn't know what to do. Or ask a surgeon, why don't you do this operation like no one else has ever done it before? They have to be logical. Now on the right side, your emotional or your creative brain, that's your playwrights, your writers, your actors, your actresses. Those people are creative. Now we use both sides of our brain. So left brain thought, right brain picture, then you act out the behavior based on the picture in your right brain. So here's the key. Your right brain, or your left brain, your right brain, there's only one word your right brain doesn't have a picture for, and that's the word not. Also understand that your brain can only focus on one thing at a time. And there's a little thing in the base of your brain called your reticular activating system. It only lets in what you're looking for. Have you ever gone to buy a car, and in the process of buying that car, you noticed that every single car, or most cars driving down the road, was the car you wanted to buy? Well, you didn't think now that people found out that was the car you wanted to buy, and they wanted to be just like you. No, that's your brain looking for, that's your RAS, looking for what you want. I say to kids, you know, if you want to go out and look for sex, drugs, and rock and roll, you'll find it. So you have to be careful what you're looking for. So The right brain doesn't have a picture for the word not. It doesn't understand negatives. So here's the rule of thumb. Talk in terms of the behavior you want, not the behavior you don't want. So you walk into the bedroom, your daughter's bedroom, and you see your child jumping on the bed. What's the first thing all parents say? Don't jump on the bed. Now your daughter or son knows what they're not supposed to do. Reframe it. In cognitive behavioral therapy terms, we call it reframing, taking something negative and turning it into a positive. So instead of saying, Sally, don't jump on the bed, say, Sally, I want you to play on the floor where it's nice and safe. You're saying exactly the same thing, but you're stating it in terms of what you want as opposed to what you don't want. See, by the time we're 17, we're told 150,000 times, no, you can't. And only 30,000 times, yes, you can. So we're told 5 times more. We're told 5 times more that, let me get this slide right. We're told 5 times more that no, you can't, as opposed to yes, you can. So let me run a few scenarios by you. Instead of saying, don't slam the door, what would be a more effective way of saying it? Close the door gently. Instead of saying, don't be late, a more effective way of saying it is, be on time. Always talk in terms of the behavior you want, not the behavior you don't want. And that's not only talking to your kids, that's talking to your coworkers, that's talking to your friends. That's your brain will thank you for it. So there's words like try, maybe, don't, hope, can't. Those are negative words. Your right brain has difficulty with those words. The word try. Think about using the word try. I want you to try to do that. If you saw your neighbor across the street having difficulty starting his lawnmower, what would you say? Oh, you say, look at Bob. He's trying to start his lawnmower. He's trying to start his car. Try is a struggle word. So when you say to your child or you say to yourself, try to do it, think about the word try. When you say, I'm going to try, now in the act of doing something, you have to try to do it, absolutely, because you're not going to succeed at everything. But if you say to yourself or to your child, I want you to try to do it, the left brain says, I'm going to try. The right brain paints a picture of someone trying to do something. What's someone trying not to do? What's someone trying to do something? They're trying, they're not doing it. What did Yoda in Star Wars say? Do or do not. There is no try. So talk in terms of the behavior you want, not the behavior you don't want. So the next time someone asks you, how are you? Instead of saying not bad, say good. I feel great. And your brain will thank you for it. So let's talk about communications. And there are, well, I'll get into that in a second. Let's say your son or daughter came home and said, Mom, you care about no one, only yourself. Or Mom, you don't love me, you love Bobby more. I think a normal reaction, and I think the most common reaction would be to get very upset and get very defensive. And say to your son or daughter, you get up in your room and you don't come out until you apologize. Or you argue with your son or daughter, and you could spend 2 hours arguing with them that you do care, but at the end of the 2 hours, your son or daughter is going to think exactly what they thought. There are only 3 statements we can make. Only 3. And every statement that we make falls into one of these 3 categories. We can lie, and most of the people that we deal with, I know kids can have a tendency to lie, but most of the people that we deal with don't lie. And of course, when you're dealing with kids, you have to determine whether that's a lie or not. We can tell a joke, and normally you can tell when a person is telling a joke because they'll say, oh, I heard this really good joke and I'd like to tell you. But the third one is a sincere statement. All statements fall into one of those 3 categories. So when someone says to you one of those statements, or someone says, Mom, you're really bullheaded, you're stubborn, They're not lying. In their own mind, you may not agree with it, but in their own mind, you had to have said something to make them say, Mom, you care about no one, only yourself. You may not believe it, but in that child's mind, they're not lying to themselves. They're not joking. They're making a sincere statement. So what do you do about it? You can do the classic approach, as I said. You can argue with them for 2 hours and they'll still believe it. You can send them to the room and say, you know, I spend all my time, I give you money, I give you, buy you clothes, I feed you, I give you a place to stay, and you're ungrateful. Go to your room. Solves nothing. Punishment. Punishment because your ego got bruised. So, what experts say to deal with this is to disarm, to diffuse and disarm. What do I mean by that? Find some truth in what they said, because in their own minds, it is the truth. So let's look at the two alternative approaches. The one approach is to argue, or to send them to the room and to punish them because of something that they said, or to find some truth. You know, Sally, I'm bothered by what you just said, and I don't ever want you to feel that you're not the most important person in my life. And what we're going to do now is we're going to sit down and we're going to figure out how to fix this, because I don't ever want you to feel that way again. So is now a good time to talk about it? Because I want you to know that you are the most important person in my life. And you know, there are times that life has gotten in the way. I've come home, I've been grumpy, I've taken work home, and I probably didn't spend as much time with you as I should have. And I apologize for that. But we're going to fix this right now. So let's look at those two approaches and think to yourself, which one would have a bigger impact? And we know which one would be. We know which one it would be. The other area, and my father, God rest his soul, was so street smart, and he taught me so many things. If there is behavior going on in the house, the one word that we avoid using is you. Because when you say, you upset me, you did this, you did that, that puts the person on the defensive. We have to be responsible for our own feelings. We can't allow someone else to create problems in our lives. So, I feel like a maid when I come out and there are dishes in the sink. I would appreciate it if you would take your dishes and put them in the dishwasher when you're finished. And then see how that works. I had an issue. I always tell this story. So always use I feel. I feel. How do you feel about the behavior that's causing a problem? And then give them an alternative. We had a split entrance. And I would come home after work, and all the boots, it's summertime, wintertime, it didn't matter, all the boots were in the entranceway and blocked with boots, and I'd have to walk over the boots to get up the stairs. I had to go to the basement 2 or 3 o'clock in the morning one time, and I went down and I almost fell over the stairs because all the boots were in the entranceway. So I was talking to my father about it, and Dad said, take the boots and put them down in the basement. I said, why? He said, well, you know, make them walk further if they're not going to put the boots in the closet. So I tried this. I feel, you know, when you leave your boots out, I'd really appreciate it if you'd put the boots in the closet. So next day I came home and the boots are still there. So that's when Dad said, put the boots down in the basement. So I put the boots down in the basement. I figured, well, if they're going to walk down over the stairs, they're going to get it. I came home the next day, boots were there. So he said, if that happens, put them further in the basement so they got further to walk. So I put them further in the basement, and then further in the basement, and then further in the basement. And I said, Dad, none of this working. He said, hide them. I said, what? He said, hide the boots. So I hid the boots, And my wife called me and said, our daughter couldn't find her boots, so she had to wear something else to school. Where are the boots? I said, I don't know. I don't know where they are. Now, my wife was upset with me, but I'll guarantee you there was never a problem after that. And some people might think, well, that's a bit extreme. That's really extreme. But what I wanted to do was use it as a teachable moment to teach our kids that, you know, just put things away. Learn to be tidy. And it was never a problem. Never a problem after that. But you need to understand your children. That may work for some, it worked for mine. It may not work for yours. But it's just thinking about how you can, unless you want to be a maid, unless you're okay with dishes and cleaning up after your kids, if you're okay with that, but what is that teaching your kids? So, the best question ever to ask your child is, what do you want? I get people in my office, I ask them what do they want, and they tell me what they don't want. I don't want to live here, I don't want this house, I don't want this job, I don't want to be married, I don't want this. And when you become an expert at what you don't want, guess what shows up in your life? All the time, what you don't want. I remember a parent calling me after a session that we had done, and she said, Gary, I took your advice. She said, my son was in grade 11, and excuse me, he was terrible. He was failing. He was doing awful. So I went to him and I said, what do you want? And he said, I want to move to Corner Brook. I want to live with Nan and Pop and do my grade 12 in Corner Brook. She said, I'll make it happen. And she said, we shipped him out for his final year in high school, and he blossomed. His marks went through the roof. He did really well in school. And when he came back, he was a different child. Simply because the parents said, what do you want? Now, we just can't ask kids what do they want and give them everything that they want. That's where the teachable moments come in. To teach kids that you can have anything you want. You just can't have everything you want. So you have to decide what's important. So that's where the teachable moment comes in. Some words to avoid when you're talking to your kids. Should, because that creates pushback. Anytime someone said to you, you should do this, you're going to get pushback. So avoid should. And even when you're talking to yourself, avoid should. Instead of saying you should have done that, a gentler way of saying is, don't you think it would have been better if you had done this? So the third thing to avoid words is why. And I'm not saying never use the word why, but I'm just saying be very careful using the word why, because it normally gets you an answer that you don't want to hear. And I'll give you an example. Your child comes home and says, Mom, I'd like to try out for the soccer team, but I can't. Now, normally, the normal answer is, well, why not? Why don't you want to try out for the soccer team? And your child, with his answer, will convince him even more that he shouldn't try out for the soccer team. So what about if you took a different approach? And I'm not saying set your child up for failure, but if you knew your child was a good soccer player, but he's got something in his head, a belief in his head that he's going to fail. How it got there, it's irrelevant. So instead of saying, why not, say, well, what would happen if you did? What would happen if you tried out and you made the team and you were one of the best soccer players on the team? I've seen you play. You can make that team. So instead of saying, why not, and he goes down a road where he's going to reinforce all the reasons why he can't do it, to, well, what would happen if you did and you made it? Now he's taken a totally different path. A totally different path of going down the road. Oh, but what about if I do make it? What about if I'm a star? I'm not saying never use why. I'm just saying be really careful, because it usually gets you, because it gets you focused on the problem. It gets you focused on what's wrong. And the other word is okay. How many times do I see parents asking their kids something and then they finish it with okay? As if you're asking the child's permission to do it. So just be careful using those 4 words. Now, look at your words matter. And I'm not going to read down through all of them, but just instead of saying be quiet, choose words like, can you use a softer voice? Instead of saying, walking into your child's room and say, whoa, what a mess, clean that up right now. Say, it looks like you had fun. How can we clean this up? How can we clean it up? You know, as parents, we can ask really good questions. And I think if we can figure out the right questions to ask, your children can figure it out all on their own. And studies have shown that if you become part of the solution, you own it and you have more of a tendency to go with it. You know, your child comes home and something is wrong, and you know, if you don't like adversity, if you grow up hating adversity, then you say, oh, you're okay, instead of saying, how are you feeling? I think one of the best gifts we could ever give, especially to boys, is to get them to talk about their feelings, to get in touch with their feelings. But many times, it's a no-no. It's you brush it off. You don't talk about your feelings. So be really careful how you choose your words. So let's talk about communications barriers. And the first one is defensiveness. When you think about, Mom, you care about nobody, only yourself. When you become defensive in any kind of a situation, you're basically confirming what the person said, instead of trying to find some truth and get to the bottom of it. So avoid becoming defensive. Avoid blaming. Your children, as I said before, should be able to come to you and talk about anything and not having to worry about it being their fault. Because when you blame, they retreat into a shell. Denying your child has an issue or a problem. When I taught grade 7, I had a kid in class who, during recess time out on the playground, would take a lit cigarette. And he would grab one of the kids who were on the playground and take the lit cigarette and burn a hole in the back of the kid's hand. And when the child came in, he had 4 or 5 burn holes, the size of the top of a cigarette, in his hand. So we called in the parents, and the parents said, our Bobby would never do that. Denied that the kid ever had a problem. We had the RCMP in to talk to the child. And when he came out of the principal's office, he looked at me and he said, Gary, that kid is fearless. He is absolutely fearless. So I think getting to know your child, understanding his interests, his likes, his dislikes, what he does, and being able to identify a problem before it becomes a catastrophe. Because there are no perfect children. There are no perfect adults. There are no perfect human beings. There are human beings who make mistakes. So the next one is labeling. And this one is really, really important. Particularly with children from birth to age 7 or 8. They really don't think that they have a viewpoint. They don't think there are any other viewpoints. They believe in Santa Claus. They believe in the Tooth Fairy. They believe in the Easter Bunny. They believe that there's monsters underneath the bed. So when your child drops something on the floor and you say that they're stupid, they carry that label with them for the rest of their lives. We all do stupid things. We're not stupid human beings. We're human beings who do stupid things. So we have to be careful of talking about the behavior and not the child. I was in the supermarket a little while ago and there was a young kid in there. He was 11 or 12 years old. And he had 2 2-liter bottles of drink. And he was struggling with the 2 of them to carry them to the checkout. And one dropped. And I guess it was his mother looked at him and said, look, you can't even carry a 2-liter bottle of Pepsi. I can only imagine that the child was embarrassed enough to drop it, but then to be labeled stupid because he dropped it. We have to be really careful how we talk to our kids, because labels like that stick with them forever, and they grow up thinking that they're stupid simply because someone told them they were stupid. I said earlier about a child who asked their father if they did drugs when they were in high school, and you remember what I said. It was none of your business what I did when I was in high school. Where do you think that child is going to go when they have a problem? Not to the father, because the father doesn't really want to talk to the child. What do you say to your child? Marijuana is now legalized. What do you say? It's no big deal. Marijuana will be legalized, or it is legalized now. Here's the teachable moment. I remember my son said to me, "Dad, did you smoke marijuana when you were in high school?" I said, "Yes, I did." But I said, "I would never, ever, ever touch it now." And he said, "Why not?" Now I had my teachable moment. I said, "You know, back in Cheech and Chong days, and you know, you'd walk through the Thompson Student Center and there'd be drug dealers selling you a dime of weed. I experimented with it. But here's the thing, THC, tetrahydrocannabinol, and we'll talk a little bit about this in the drug part. Back then, you know, it was grown outdoors, in the fresh air. The THC level was very small, 5, 4, 3% THC. Today, it's grown in clandestine labs with all kinds of rat feces around. And the THC levels that are in marijuana today are up 15, 18, 20, 25%. So you have to be very careful as to what you're putting in your lungs. Really careful. And then we went on and looked at some of the videos about drugs and what it does, and it was a teachable moment for me to be able to talk to him about the dangers of drugs. What would you say if your 13-year-old daughter comes home and says, "Mom, I want to be on birth control"? Would you scold her and tell her over my dead body? Do you know that kids as young as that age can get birth control and you don't even know about it? Wouldn't you want to know why they'd want to be on birth control? Wouldn't you want to know who is maybe influencing them to be on birth control? That's another teachable moment for your children. And your 16-year-old owes $1,000 to a drug dealer. What would you do? How would you deal with it? I had a parent say I'd go out and I'd find the biggest, baddest, meanest person on the street, and I'd take him to the drug dealer. And I thought that was kind of humorous, and we kind of said, you know, that may not be the best way of dealing with it. But would you pay the $1,000 off? What about if your son said, "The drug dealer threatened to break my leg if I didn't pay him off"? Of course you'd pay him off. But you would also put a plan in place to make sure that your son or daughter paid you back. That there are consequences to everything that they do. A friend of mine came up with a very unique idea, and I'm only just putting this out there because it worked for her, but she knew her son really well. So she was cleaning her son's drawers and found a bag of marijuana. And we were doing a session at one school, I can't remember, and she told this story. And she knew someone in the RNC and called him and explained the situation, because these guys are here to help. You know, they're your friend. So she said, "Can you come by? I found marijuana in my son's drawer. If I confront him with it, you know, he's only going to get defensive. He's going to say it's none of my business being in his drawer." I did this program with a constable, and he said if he's been in the houses where the kids had locks on their door, he said he would take the hinges off the door off the hinges and leave the house, leave the no door on the room if that's what needed. Because when he went into the house, the parents said, "Well, that's my son's room. You're not allowed in there." When he went in, he had a grow-up, marijuana grow-up going on in his room. So we have to be very careful. But just getting back to the story, so she called her friend and said, "Can you come by? The marijuana's in the top drawer on the left-hand side." So he came by, they were sitting down having dinner, and of course the son didn't know anything that was going on. Of course, if she had confronted him with it, what's the first thing they're going to say? That's not mine. I'm holding it down for someone else. So he came and knocked on the door, and she said, yes, I'm Constable such and such. We've had issues with drugs in your area. Would it be okay if I come in and search your house? And he came in. Of course, what's the first thing that the son is thinking? Well, uh-oh. So we went around the house and finally went into the son's room, stayed in there for about 5 minutes, and came out with a bag of weed and said, this was in your room. What did the son say? That's not mine. Well, it doesn't matter. You're in possession of it. Come with me. So he brought the son out to the squad car and put him in the back seat. Now, there are no handles, no way. Once you're in there, the only way you can get out is if the police officer lets you out. So he said to the kid, he was 15 years old, I think, he said, I see the court docket every day. He said, I see who's coming up. He said, if I ever see your name on the docket again, he said, I'm going to let you go this time. But he said, if I ever see your name on the docket, you won't be going back into your warm house and your warm bed and comfortable bed to sleep. You'll be sleeping in the lockup. And if you'd like to know what the lockup is like, let me know and I'll bring you down and I'll show you what it's like. It's not a pleasant place to be. And the mother said he totally changed his behavior. Now, that was a bit of a scare tactic, and it worked for her son. Just know your kids. Know what can work for them and what can work and what won't work for them, because there's no cookie cutter solution to any of this. So, if we talk about children and emotions, oh, and this is in your workbook, just look at all of those and ask yourself, are you guilty of any of those? Judging, yelling, forcing, derailing, mind reading, ordering, threatening, moralizing, comparing, ineffective praise. We're going to spend a lot of time on praise in a minute. Pitying, shaming, interrogating, denying. The three biggest ones are right there. Kids want to have a safe place where they can talk to their parents without being judged. They don't want to be yelled at. We don't want to be yelled at. And most importantly, we don't want to be forced to do something. We want to be able to have a choice. And our kids are no different. So that's communicating with your children. The third area is helping them make good decisions. And as you know, kids sometimes make decisions that we shake our heads and wonder, what were you thinking? Well, sometimes they're just not thinking. So the two key aspects, and I think these are the biggest aspects of this presentation. The first one is praise. And I'll set this video up. Carol Dweck was a Stanford psychologist, PhD. She spent 30 years studying praise. And how do we praise our kids? We all want to praise our kids. And after I played this video, I had one parent say, I guess we were doing it wrong all these years. And I said, no, but there are more effective ways of doing it. So I want you to watch this video and really understand, because when I get in and I talk to teachers, this is what I want to teach teachers how to get across to their kids. It's called a growth mindset. And that's what Carol Dweck says. We need to praise our kids, not on intelligence or not on the result, but on the effort, on hard work. That's what we need to praise, is hard work, not intelligence. And when you watch the video, it'll all come clear, and then we'll get into it a little bit more.
So check this out. Carol Dweck and her colleagues wanted to look into the impacts that praise had on children's development. So what they did is they took over 400 fifth grade students from all across the nation, and they did a really simple yet interesting study. Here's how it went down. They gave all the kids a really easy non-verbal IQ test. There were 10 questions, and at the end of the test, they praised all the children in one of two ways. The first group was praised for their intelligence. So they said, "Wow, great job, you must be really smart at this." Now the second group was praised for their effort. So they said, "Wow, great job, you must have worked really, really hard at this." Now this is a really subtle difference, but the impact it had is incredible. So after praising the kids and getting them divided up into the two groups, they gave them all an option for their next test. The first option was, hey, this next test is going to be a little bit harder, but it's going to be a great opportunity to learn and grow. Now the second option was, this next test will be similar to the first and you will surely do well on it. Now the interesting thing is, out of the group that was praised for their intelligence, 67% of them chose the easier option, while 92% of the kids who were praised for their effort chose the harder test. This is unbelievable to think about, how just the subtle difference in the way that they were praised had such an impact. Carol Dweck explains why this happens.
The child or adult hears, "Oh, you think I'm brilliant and talented. That's why you admire me, that's why you value me. I better not do anything that will disprove this evaluation." As a result, they enter a fixed mindset, they play it safe in the future, and they limit the growth of their talents. Whereas focusing on the strategies they use, the way they're stretching themselves and taking on hard tasks, the intense practice they're doing, those are the kinds of things that say to a child or an older athlete, it's about the process of growth. As a result, they don't feel, oh, if I make a mistake, you won't think I'm talented. They think, oh, if I don't take on hard things and stick to them, I'm not going to grow.
Next, Dweck and her colleagues gave all the kids a really, really difficult test. It was one that they would surely fail, but they wanted to look at how the different kids attacked this challenge. Dweck noticed that the group that was praised for effort worked harder, longer, and actually enjoyed this test more than the group that was praised for their intelligence. This group got really frustrated with this test and had the tendency to give up early. After this artificially induced failure round, all of the kids were given a third and final test. Now this test was the same level of difficulty as the first one, but check out the results. The group that was praised for their intelligence actually did worse on this test than the first one. Their average score actually dropped by 20%, while the group that was praised for their effort did significantly better, raising their average score by nearly 30%. This is a 50% difference in performance that was caused by a few subtle differences in the way that they were praised. This study shows how praise can either make or break a child's development. I mean, we all do it. We all want to be positive with the children we work with, so teachers, coaches, parents are always looking for ways to support their kids and tend to praise them quite a bit. So we need to look at research like this and realize, okay, praise is a good thing and there's nothing wrong with being positive, but we need to be very careful about praising someone's intelligence or abilities and focus more on the process and the effort.
I know you're thinking the same thing that most parents are thinking. Wow, I haven't been very effective when I'm praising my children. So let's really analyze what Dr. Carol Dweck talked about when she talked about developing a growth mindset. Your 5-year-old brings in this picture that she just drew. I think the normal response, and what pretty well every parent would say, is, "Oh my, what a lovely drawing. You are a really good artist. What a wonderful job you did." You're praising the result. So take a step back and praise the effort. So what Carol Dweck is saying, a more effective praise would be, "Oh my, that's a wonderful picture you drew. I love the colors that you used, and I love the hearts that you did, and I love the effort that you put into the flowers and all those nice rainbows and the colors. Oh, you must have worked really, really hard to put that picture together." Notice the difference? You're praising effort instead of result. So the power of believing in yourself. When children are praised on intelligence, in other words, you must be really smart to be able to do that. That's praising on intelligence. What Carol Dweck has found is that when you praise them on intelligence and they're given a difficult task to do, they figured out a way to cheat, or they hung around with people who had a worse mark than they did. They're always searching for the next A. They can't dream big. They need validation. They need reward daily. They gravitate to easier tasks. They feel judged. And they want revenge when they're being bullied. That's what Carol Dweck found. And the reason why they gravitate to easier tasks is because they don't want you to, if they try something difficult and they fail, then they're going to think that their parent doesn't think they're smart. Because we're gauging them on their intelligence level. And Carol Dweck says, IQ is not fixed. Being bad at math is not a dead end. We can all improve in all aspects of our life. So that's the problem with praising on intelligence. So let's look at when we praise on effort and the child is given a difficult task. They persevere because they know hard work. They know that making a mistake is part of the process. They develop higher self-esteem. They have increased brain power. They thrive when they're challenged. They rarely feel judged. They're more curious and creative. And they cope better when they're bullied. Simply because you praise the effort rather than praising intelligence. So, it's not the mark on the report card. It's the effort. A friend of mine, when we finished high school, was to me the smartest person I've ever known. He was incredibly gifted. And he got 100 on his final in chemistry. 100 in chemistry. Went to university and failed his first year chemistry. Why? Because it came easy to him. He didn't have to study in high school. And then when he got to university, he figured, I don't have to study there, I don't have to work hard. And he failed. Teaching our kids work ethic is really, really critical. So, let's analyze some of these statements. The first one is, you learn that so quickly. Sorry, not soon quickly. You learn that so quickly, you are so smart. What are you praising when you're saying that? Just think about it for a second. You learn that so quickly, you are so smart. You're praising quickness and your intelligence. So what you're really saying to the person is, if you don't learn something quick, or the child is saying to themselves, if I don't learn something really quick, Mom is not going to think I'm smart, or Dad is not going to think I'm smart. That's why they gravitate to easier tasks. Because it's easier for them. Because they're judged on intelligence. They don't want to be judged on hard work. They want to be judged on intelligence. So quickness is an intelligence level for them. So if they're asked to do something difficult and it's going to take longer, then Mom or Dad doesn't think I'm smart. The next one. You are so brilliant. Your child brings home a report card and he's got an A on his math test. You are so brilliant. You got an A and you didn't even study. Mom, I got an A. Look, I didn't even study for it. You are so brilliant. You got an A without even studying. What are you saying to your child? Your child is saying, I better stop studying or they won't think I'm brilliant. You see the relationship? How it works, that praising hard work is much more effective than praising intelligence. Let's look at the next one. You did that so quickly. You made no mistakes. You're a genius. You did that so quickly and you got them all right. You're a genius. What are you judging? Speed and perfection. If they're not perfect, if they don't get 100%, they're not smart. If they don't do it really fast, they're not smart. So what I would say, not why do kids gravitate to easier tasks? Why not? Because that's what we're judging. We're judging they better do it fast and they better be perfect or mom or dad are not going to think you're smart. Let's look at the next one. What if your child finishes a math problem quickly and with no mistakes? What do you say? Now, we know what not to say. You know, you did it really quickly and you had made no mistakes. What a genius. Here's the thing to say. I apologize for giving you something too easy. Let's do something more suited to you. You're constantly challenging them. You're constantly wanting them to get better and better and better. It's okay to make mistakes. You learn from your mistakes. Let's look at the next one. What if your child doesn't do something very well? Let's face it, we can't be perfect at everything. We're imperfect human beings living in an imperfect world. Studies show that everyone learns differently. Let's use a different strategy. Or say something like, I loved your effort. Now let's see what you don't understand. See the difference? It always comes back to effort, because you can always control the effort. You can't always control the outcome. But you have 100% control over the effort that you make. Now, this is a true story. This has actually happened. This guy's daughter was in a gymnastics meet. She was 9 years old. She was very lean. She was very flexible and strong. It was only her first year. She had only started out gymnastics, but she was really learning really, really well. And she really thought she had a shot at winning the competition. But she lost. What do you tell your daughter? Okay, you've got 5 options. I want you to look at these 5 options, and you tell me. Number 1, would you say to your daughter, well, you should have won? Do you say, oh, you were robbed? You were robbed of the medal. Number 3, would you say, gymnastics is not really that important in the whole scheme of things? You know, you'll get over it. Number 4, you have talent and you will win the next time. Which is almost the same as number 1, right? And the last one is, well, you really didn't deserve to win, did you? So let's just look at each of those. If you said to your daughter, well, you should have won, that's really being insincere, isn't it? I remember a hockey coach saying one time that they lost a hockey game. It was a professional coach. He said, we should have won. And I'm saying, well, no. The team with the most goals should have won. So when you say to yourself, I should have got that job, I should have done this, what you're saying is, I don't need to do anything different. I'll continue to do what I'm doing. I'm going to do the same things over and over again, but I'm going to expect a different result. Should is a bad word. So that's being insincere for starters. Number 2, she was robbed of the medal. Well, what are you doing there? You're blaming somebody else. It's somebody else's fault that she didn't win the medal. Number 3, gymnastics is not important. Well, that's devaluing the importance that the daughter put on the gymnastics. Number 4, you have talent, you will win the next one. Well, how? How is she going to win if she doesn't change? So the father picked number 5, but he didn't say it that way. And this is what he said, and I want you to listen to what he said to his daughter. I know you were disappointed and you feel awful, but when you look at what just happened, the girls who won are doing this longer and worked really hard. If you want to have fun, that's great. But if you want to win, then let's roll up our sleeves and get to work. The next year, the daughter won the gymnastics competition, simply because the father focused on work ethic rather than blaming other people or expecting her to continue to do the same things over and over again. So be careful about how you praise your kids, and always praise on effort. Teach them to love challenges, to be intrigued by mistakes, to enjoy the effort and keep learning. It's not intelligence, but process, study, persistence, and good strategies. That's what makes a successful adult who contributes to society. That's my grandson. I think he was 5 when that picture was taken, and I decided to put this into practice. So he loved this Minion game. And when he'd come over, he'd have the Minion game, and he was unbelievable at it. And he would go for half an hour. And he'd say, Papi, do you want to try? And I'd last for maybe 5 seconds, and he'd fall off the road. And so I found he was getting really easy. This was getting really easy for him, and it was like, so I decided to put challenges in. And I'd nudge him, and I'd cover his eyes, and I'd push him a little bit, and I'd say, oh, watch out, you're gonna fall off the track. And he said, Papi, if I fall off the track, I'll just start over again. It really works, and now we're teaching him the effort, work ethic, into it, make mistakes is okay. Everybody makes them. And he's thriving. He's doing according to Yale Professor William Dershowitz, adolescent expert in social science, when we teach our children the outcomes are more important than it becomes about the end game. The problem is that the end game is often not intrinsically rewarding. Each effort, each moment, rather than being full as a part of a rich life, is graded into being a mere step in the process that leads to an existential abyss. The strategies show we have raised a generation of kids who are that opinion is more important.
The audio's cutting in there.
Oh, is it? Okay. Recording? Okay, so I'm not going to read all of this thing that's there on the screen, but I'm going to focus on the second and the fourth paragraph. Professor William Dershowitz wrote an article, and he talked to an expert called Madeline Levine and other social scientists, and they said that the statistics show we have raised a generation of kids who are taught that appearance is more important than substance, and that outcomes are more important than character. As a result, they inhabit empty vessels that lead them to a series of negative behaviors that result in, yes, unhappiness, which can they try to erase with empty sex, drugs, and alcohol. And the last paragraph, kids cheat in school because they think grades are more important than what they learn. They take shortcuts because they believe the longer, harder path has no value, or because they are afraid of stumbling or of being seen as someone who stumbles. They are mean or cruel or uncaring, often because they do not like themselves. They feel they cannot make the grade. Again, supporting Carol Dweck. Now, I'm going to play a video. The marshmallow test. So the first concept, the 2 keys, the first one was teaching your kids a growth mindset. This one is about delayed gratification. And delayed gratification is not taking something short term, but focusing on the long term. And they did this marshmallow test, and it's really, really interesting to show you how delayed gratification works with kids. There's 3 videos, actually, the marshmallow test, and there's one about if we give our children everything and we don't set limits, how spoiling our kids as they grow up. And then the last one is the millennials and the Gen Y and the Gen Z, and what happens when they actually go to a job interview. So just take a listen.
Okay, sit in that chair. All right, here's the deal. Marshmallow for you. You can either wait, and I'll give you another one if you wait, or you can eat it now. When I come back, I'll give you another one, so then you'll have 2. But stay in here and stay in the chair till I come back, okay? All right. How'd you do? Did you do good? You did?
Yeah.
You wanted to eat it, didn't you? Yeah. So did I tell you to give you another one? Okay, now you can have both. You need them.
Let's get to the heart of spoiling your child right now. Spoiling your child means that you avoid the hard work of parenting, including setting limits and boundaries in favor of giving in. Spoiling is actually about laziness. When you spoil your child, you refuse to make it through the agony of the tantrum and the embarrassment of the fit, and you give in when your child needs a limit, needs a boundary, and needs you to stay firm. For some parents, spoiling is about paying their kids off with stuff rather than love, time, and affection. If your children are spoiled, the first person to look at is you. Spoiled kids, in my opinion, are hurting kids. They're kids that get stuff instead of attention. How can you turn it around? Well, you can set a limit. Observe it. If you say that he can't go out until he finishes his homework, stick with it. Talk to your children about their needs and wants. Try to understand why they want that toy or why they want that car. If your children want material things to foster their popularity or to compensate for loneliness, that's important information, and you need to do something about that. Help your children discover what their needs, interests, and passions are and foster those passions. Teach your children the unique pleasure of earning something through responsible behavior, whether it's a paycheck, an award, or an opportunity to go camping with friends.
Amy, it says you are trained in technology. That's very good. Are you adept at Excel?
No.
PowerPoint?
No.
Publisher?
Not really.
Exactly in what area of technology are you proficient?
Snapchat, Pinterest, Instagram, Vine, Twitter. You know, the big ones.
I'm surprised you didn't say Facebook.
That's for old people, like my parents. That's funny.
Well, Amy, when you're working for me, you have to have those kind of research skills because I'll send you things for you to comb through and get the answers and send them to me. So for that, you got to be really good at technology.
For stuff like that, no problem. I'll just ask Siri.
You'll just ask Siri?
You know, Siri tell me this, Siri find me that. We're all good at getting you the answers.
Tell Siri I want you ready to go at 8 sharp each and every morning.
I don't understand.
What don't you understand?
What you just said.
You don't understand be ready to go?
No. You said 8, right?
Yes.
8 like in the morning 8?
Yes, in the morning.
Yeah. That kind of doesn't work for me. Who gets up at 8?
I do.
I Skype with my French boyfriend in Paris until like 3 in the morning. I don't even get to Starbucks until like 10, where I order my grande chai tea latte, 3 pumps, skim milk, light water, 2% foam, extra hot, but not too hot. So if it's okay, I work best in the morning at 10:45.
Wow. Amy, I don't think we're going to be a good fit.
Why are you so negative? I can sense your hostilities, and right now I am not feeling very safe. I've been here for over 5 minutes, and the only nice thing you have said to me was nice resume, which I typed all night for this meeting with you. You've given me no guidance, no validation, no encouragement, no supervision. Is there an HR director somewhere?
HR director?
Yes, I need to speak to someone. I may have to take off today as a mental health day.
Take today off. Amy, look at me. You don't work here.
Are you firing me?
Okay, yes.
So, there you have it. There's the result of spoiling our kids, of telling them that they can have whatever they want and they don't have to work. So, delayed gratification is key, is so key to success. So your child doesn't finish grade 12 and he decides he wants to go to McDonald's so he can make $12 an hour. He delays that $12 an hour. He goes and gets a post-secondary education to wherever he goes so he can make $30, $40, $50, $60 an hour. That's delayed gratification. Delayed gratification is instead of your child putting his hand out to want some money, you tell him to go mow the lawn. And that's his chore. That's how he earns his money. So millennials in the workforce and Gen Z, and as I said earlier, many of the top business owners say that kids coming in today want to get paid, but they don't want to work for it. They don't have any idea of what work ethic is, of what a good hard day's work is. They've never seen themselves complete a task. So here's the entitlement cure. It's very, very simple. Finding success in doing hard things the right way. That's it. Life is hard. It's going to be hard sometimes. It's not always going to be fair. So we need to set our kids up so that they're prepared to deal with it when life throws them a curveball. So, killing them with kindness. I've seen parents delivering papers for kids on a Saturday morning because their kids were too tired. As a teacher, I knew the parents had done their homework. I've seen parents say they dragged their kids out of bed to bring them to hockey practice. If your kid really wants to play hockey and it's really important to them, buy them an alarm clock. And I'll tell you, they'll only sleep in one time and then it'll never be a problem again. I had one parent say, if I can only get my son through high school. And I don't know how that son turned out. Maybe he turned out fine, and maybe he didn't. But these are the things that we have to teach our kids so that they become successful in life. You know, research shows, believe it or not, that timeouts are not effective. And I've had some parents, when I put this slide up, they say, well, that's all I got left. If you take timeouts away from me, I'm finished. But here's the psychology behind it. And I'm not saying I agree with this. I'm just putting this out there for you to make your own determination. The psychology behind it is, if you put a child in timeout, what you're saying is, I don't love you when you're in a timeout. When you're good, you can come with us, but when you're bad, you have to go to your room in a timeout. What psychologists are saying is, it's better to go into the room with your child, put your arm around them and tell them that you understand. And then to work through the problem as to why they had that temper tantrum, why they couldn't take no for an answer. That's the psychology. It's up to you to decide. Rules. Make sure your rules are clear and reasonable, they're consistent, and they have a range of consequences. If your son or daughter has an allowance and they spend their allowance in the first day, then I guess they go the next 6 days without any money. If you spent all the money in your bank account, where would you get some money? I mean, the bank wouldn't just give you more. You'd have to wait until you got paid again. So making rules clear and consistent. I remember when I was growing up, every Friday when I came home from school, my mother made me do my homework. And what it taught me was a really strong work ethic. It taught me work before play. And that's my motto, and I took that with me throughout my whole school life. And even now, today, when something has to be done, I do it. So I would see all my friends out playing, and Mom would say, Gary, get it done now, and then you got the rest of the weekend. Anything could happen. And so that's how I managed to live my life. Anytime when I taught, if I didn't, when I finished for the summer, I'd get a summer job. And for 2 or 3 years, I did a summer job, and I took every cent that I made at that summer job and paid off my student loan sooner than most people paid off their student loan. Because I knew that was something that was going to help me farther on in life. I could have taken the summer off, but I chose not to because I knew that was going to help me. When my daughter finished high school, I said, you know, you're entering a new phase of your life now. Why don't Dad take you out to your favorite restaurant? And so we went to the Casa Grande. She loved Mexican food, and we sat down, had a great meal. And she said, Dad, you had something for me. So I took out 4 pages of information that I had. It might have been 2 pages. I can't remember. It was a long time ago. And it was just things on life, things about friendship, things about money, things about finances, things about ethics, things about morals, things about values. And I said, you know, your dad did pretty good in his life. These are some of the things that have helped me, and I'm hoping it will help you. So what I did was I set the right stage. I asked for her permission. She was 18 years old. She didn't have to listen to me, but she listened to me, and she took those pages. I don't know what she did with it, but when she graduated, she said, Dad, do you remember? And she graduated with a commerce degree in HR. She's doing wonderful now, has her own house, and doing really, really well. She said, Dad, do you remember when you took me out to lunch that day and you gave me those 2 pages? I said, yes, sweetheart. What about them? She said, there's one thing that stuck with me that made me want to do better. And I said, what's that? She said, when you said, if you think getting an education is hard, try living without one. And I think every single child needs to understand the consequences, because life will make you pay. That's one of the things I say to kids. Life will make you pay. Either you'll pay now with a good education, or you'll pay later with a really lousy paying job. An RCMP officer gave me this, and I thought it was genius. We've all heard of vision boards. Most people don't use them. The best gift you could give yourself is a vision board, because it basically creates the life that you want. And so this is basically a vision board. You get a piece of construction paper, you cut out pictures, you download pictures from the internet, and it basically creates the life that you want. So he said he used a vision board to sit down and teach his son a lesson. And this is what he did, and I use it when I talk to kids. So he said, I took my son, and he was 17 or 18 years old, and they went through the internet, and he asked him, what kind of a house do you want to live in? And that's the house that they picked. He said, perfect, excellent. And then he said, okay, what kind of a car do you want to drive? Oh, he said, Dad, I'd love to have that kind of a car. He said, I would really, really love to have that kind of a car. He said, well, what about vacations? Oh, he said, Dad, I'd love to have at least 1, maybe 2 vacations a year. He said, I'd love to have that. He said, well, what about clothes? Oh, yeah, Dad, I'd love designer clothes. I'd love to have designer clothes. That would be really, really great. He said, well, you know, that's great that you have lofty ambitions like that. But he said, you need to be able to pay for that. So let's just look at what it's going to cost. So to support that kind of a lifestyle, you're probably going to want to make at least $90,000, $100,000 a year to support that kind of a lifestyle. You're going to need that. So what are your plans? You're finishing up high school now. What do you plan on doing for your next 4 years? Are you going to look at a degree or a trade or something? Oh, he said, Dad, I don't really have any plans. I haven't really decided what I'm going to do. Oh, he said, okay then. Well, we have to scale down what the outcome of your no plans are, because if you're going to go work at a fast food place, then you're not going to make $90,000 a year. You're going to probably be more like $20,000 or $25,000 a year. So on that kind of a salary, let's look at what kind of a house you're going to live in. If you can even afford a house at all, you'll probably wind up living in a basement apartment, because you don't expect to live with me for the rest of your life. So let's look at the kind of a car you're going to drive. Well, forget about that sports car, because that's probably the only kind of a car you're going to be able to drive if you can afford a car, if you can afford insurance, if you can afford payments, if you can afford maintenance. You probably will have to walk or take the bus. And what about vacations? Well, you're probably not going to need a vacation, so you'll wind up staying home on your vacation. And then, of course, if you want to look at clothes, well, you can forget the designer clothes, because on an income of $25,000, you're not going to be able to afford very much. Most of us are visual learners. We learn visually, we learn through hearing, and we learn through touch and feel, actually doing it. But most of us, 65, 70% of people are visual learners. So when you put that up in front of your child and he sees the difference, something may just click in because they haven't thought it through. And it's our job as parents to help them think through all of these circumstances and the results of the decisions that they make. Now, I'm only going to say one thing about bullying. There is all kinds of information on the Eastern School District's website about bullying. So I would recommend that you go there. If your child is being bullied, there's all kinds of resources available to help you do that. And that's all I really want to say, but there are incredible resources specifically in the Eastern School District's website to talk and help you about bullying. So let me leave you with some final thoughts, and we'll clue this up. I'll repeat again what Ann Lander said. It is not what you do for your children, but what you have taught them to do themselves that will make them successful human beings. Every interaction with your child is a teaching experience for you and a learning experience for them. Thinking through quality questioning. I said that earlier. If you ask the right questions, kids are smart enough to figure it out themselves, and then they own it. Encourage feelings. Encourage your children to talk about their feelings. Don't dismiss their feelings, because their feelings are just as important as your feelings. They're just as important. Be the person you needed when you were young. Just think about that statement. Be the person you needed when you were young. And that's you right now. Enter into a contract. I had a parent tell me she entered into a contract with her daughter, and the daughter had 3 or 4 things to do in order to have the privilege of having a cell phone. And she said it worked out great. The first 2 or 3 days were great, and then all of a sudden the room got untidy. She wasn't doing her chores. She wasn't doing this. She gave her one warning. She said, I'm giving you one warning, and that's it. So the next day it was untidy. The mother walked into the room to put her hand out, and the daughter put the cell phone in her hand. She said, now you can have that cell phone back when you can show me that you've earned the right to have that cell phone, because it's not free. Contracts, a lot of guidance counselors will tell you that contracts are a good thing. It teaches kids responsibility. It teaches them that nothing is free. Nothing in life is free. So here's the 10 most common mistakes parents make, and I'll end off with this, and just ask yourself and think and reflect. Do you make any of these mistakes? Number 1, do you parent by guilt? Are you guilty because you think your kids deserve more than what you got? Be careful of parenting by guilt, because you'll have a tendency to give them way too much. Do you jump in and help when the child doesn't need any help? Do you hover and try to protect them from themselves? Do you allow them a certain amount of risk to learn from their mistakes? Or do you not allow them to take risks? Do you talk to them about mistakes you've made? When my son asked me about did I do marijuana in high school, it was a great teachable moment to talk to him about the dangers of what's going on today. What kind of praise do you use? Is it effective? Do you teach them work ethic, or do you teach them that it's all about intelligence? Intelligence will get you so far, but it won't take you all the way. Work ethic, hard work, being able to roll with the punches, being comfortable with mistakes. Do you yell? Do you scream? Do you intimidate? Do you preach? Instead of sitting down and working through the issues and guiding your children to make good decisions. Don't misplace talent for intellect, because it gets misunderstood. Just because your child is talented doesn't mean he's growing intellectually. So don't disguise that. Don't misinterpret it. Do you shower your kids? Do you give them everything that they ask for? Or do you help them to choose that you can have some things, but you can't have everything? Do you put your child on a pedestal? Do you make him feel that he's better than everybody else, that he can't make any mistakes? And when you think about it, when you put your child on a pedestal and you're looking up at him, how is he looking at you? He's looking down. So be careful putting your child on a pedestal. And of course, the biggest mistake that most parents make is involving your children in adult issues. Because what happens is the child is thinking two things: that this is my fault, and my world at some point is going to come crashing down. Don't involve children in adult issues, because that leads to low self-esteem, low self-worth, and dependence. If there are issues, you make sure kids are never involved in those issues. If you're in a situation where you're separating, don't get at your spouse through your child. Don't use your children as missiles. And we've seen it so many times. There was a judge who was talking to a couple who were separating, and this is what he said to the parents. Your children have come into this world because of the two of you. Perhaps you two made lousy choices as to whom you decided to be the other parent. If so, that is your problem and your fault. No matter what you think of the other party or what your family thinks of the other party, these children are one half of each of you. Remember that, because every time you tell your child what an idiot his father is, or what a fool his mother is, or how bad the absent parent is, or what terrible things that person has done, you are telling the child half of him is bad. That is unforgivable. That is an unforgivable thing to do to a child. That is not love. That is possession. If you do that to your children, you will destroy them as surely as if you had cut them into pieces, because that is what you are doing to their emotions. I sincerely hope that you do not do that to your children. Think more about your children and less about yourselves, and make yours a selfless kind of love, not foolish or selfish, or your children will suffer. So we all go through adversity. We all don't like some things when life happens to us, but always make sure your kids are not at the end of that issue. So to end off, what do all successful parents do? Well, they use logical consequences. As I said, if you spend your allowance in the first day, then I guess you don't have any money for the next 6 days. Give children input into the decisions that affect them. Studies show that if you become part of the solution, you become part of the if you become part of the solution, then you own the solution. Use discipline and not punishment, because there's a big difference. Discipline teaches, punishment forces. So when you send your child up to the room and let them simmer for a couple of hours, and don't go up and talk to them about the decisions that they made and the consequences of it. Discipline is actually the same result, but you teach them what the consequences are and what some alternatives they could have used instead of making the decision that they made. In all cases, avoid conflict. You always do everything you can to avoid conflict. But if there is a conflict, you never lose. Because all you have to do is lose once, and now you've given your child one foot in the door to taking control of the situation. And they don't have the brain power to be able to take control of that situation. We grow more from our mistakes. Understand that. We grow new neural pathways when we learn something new. Our brain is constantly evolving, constantly growing. So when we let our children make mistakes, they grow neural pathways. They see themselves correcting the mistakes that they made. And they grow and they become well-adjusted adults with high self-esteem. Always reward positive behavior. You never reward negative behavior. Because what you're saying to the child is, that negative behavior is fine. Here's 20 bucks. I would say then, I wouldn't ask the child, why is he doing it? I would say, well, why not? So always reward positive behavior. As Carol Dweck showed in her 30 years of research, praise effort, not result. That's what we need to praise, is the effort, not the result. So I'll end off with just a few things on drugs. I'm not going to get into all the different types of street drugs, but there are some things you need to know. Notice the eyes. If pupils are dilated, there's an issue. Notice teeth. If teeth are becoming discolored, then there could be a problem. Notice temper. If your child just goes from one extreme to the other extreme and has a low fuse, notice their hygiene. If they're not being careful about their hygiene, if they seem like they don't care, notice these things. If they have like multiple personalities, notice those are sure telltale signs that there's a problem. If you notice things missing in your house, that could be your son or daughter is taking things to sell to get money to buy drugs. If you notice that your child has a little more money than they should have and they're not working, that they could be selling drugs. I talked to a parent after a session, and her son was 13 years old, and she had to go to the police station the next day because he was dealing in drugs. I talked to another parent whose daughter was 22 years old. She was in charge of collecting rent for an apartment building, and I guess they gave her free rent. And she owed the guy who owned the building $27,000 because she was taking rent money and buying drugs. You don't ever want things like that to happen. That's why we need to be very careful that we guide our children through adolescence and make them become well-adjusted members of society who give to society, don't take away from it. If you notice, as I said, money, if you notice your kids are dressing in nice designer clothes, that's a sign. That's a sign that they're getting money from somewhere else. So we have to be aware of that. So I encourage you to go to my website. There's the address, GarySummers.ca/workbook.pdf. That's a 50-page manual that I created myself that has research that I've done on the internet, and there's some really good tools. There's a Search Institute. There's 40 developmental assets that they say if you can teach your child to be strong in all of these, then they won't turn to drugs. They'll be well-adjusted members of society. There's, like I said, info on the English School District bullying and on how to use social media. There's the information there I gave to my daughter when I took her out to lunch. And I also do one-on-one programs as well. There's information there on that as well. 3 books that I would ask you to consider. The book that Carol Dweck called Mindset, The New Psychology of Success. Probably the most influential book I have ever read, and it's for parents. There's a website called BigLifeJournal.com. And Alexandra Idens developed a website, and it's about teaching your kids a growth mindset. And there are 2 books there, and then she's got all kinds of downloadables. I suggest you join her group. I think she's got 50,000 people in the group or something. But there's a book for ages 5 to 11, and there's another book for ages 12 to 14, and this teaches kids that mistakes are okay, that learning is important, that it's all a journey. It's about work ethic. So I would really encourage you to consider those books. I got mine at Chapters, and the other two I got from Alexandra at biglifejournal.com, and you can order them, plus all kinds of posters and things. And all you're really doing is giving your kids the tools to be successful. Now, I'd like to end off with 2 videos. The first one is drugs and what they do. And then the second one is a commercial that was done in Australia. It's very graphic, so I think every teenager would do well to watch the video, but watch it yourself first. It is a commercial, it is an ad for texting and driving. And it just goes to show that all young kids would do well to watch the consequences of that video.
They said one hit wouldn't hurt. They said one hit wouldn't hurt.
They lied. Get your kids the truth about drugs. drugfreeworld.org.
Hi, James. My mate Jules fancies you. Cass. It's not a funny. It's not even funny now. Let me just get his number. Mommy, Daddy, wake up! Mommy, Daddy, wake up!
I just can't get any response whatsoever.
I want Mommy and Daddy to wake up.
Are you clean anyway, lovely? Yeah, are you clean your neck at all? You're nice and still for me. Alright, keep looking at me. Alright. Cassie, can you hear me? What's your friend's name in the back? What's it? Jules, is it? Nice and still there for me. Yeah, you're going to be okay. We need to get you off to the hospital.
Thank you very much for taking the time to listen to what I've had to say. It's nice to be able to listen to this in the comforts of your own room, and certainly take the time to download the workbook from my website and go through it. There's some good exercises that not only you do as a parent, but you can do with your child to see if you're on the same wavelength. Thanks very much for watching, and I hope you got something from it. And stay tuned for some more great interviews and presentations from other wellness experts in the field.